The silence was the loudest thing in the universe, a crushing, absolute void that had followed the scream. Dr. Eris Thorne heard it in the hum of the station's life support, in the distant, rhythmic clang of a maintenance drone, in the very beat of his own blood. It had been 10 standard years since Earth had answered the Eithel's quiet genocide, not with warships or orbital bombardments, but with a single, elegant equation that had become a weapon. The Ethel. The self-appointed shepherds of galactic harmony had deemed humanity's chaotic, emotional nature a dissonance that needed to be muted. They hadn't sent fleets, they had sent a plague, a tailored retrovirus delivered on the solar winds, designed to gently and irrevocably sterilize 99% of the species over 3 generations. It was a clean, passionless extinction, a footnote in their grand, harmonious symphony. But humanity had never been good at going quietly into the night. They had raged, and from that rage, Eris Thorne had forged the Echo. It wasn't a bomb, it was a scalpel, a quantum entanglement device that targeted the unique quantum signature of a species and simply unraveled it. It didn't kill, it unwrote. It plucked the thread of a civilization from the tapestry of space-time, leaving behind not ruins or bodies, but a seamless, chilling absence, as if they had never existed at all. They had used it only once, a demonstration on the Ethel's primary colony in the Kepler 186 system. One moment, a world of billions, a culture 10,000 years old. The next, a barren rock, geologically pristine, its history erased from the cosmic record. The scream had been the psychic backlash felt by every sentient mind in the galaxy, a fleeting, agonizing moment of collective metaphysical loss. Then came the silence. For 10 years, the Ethel Empire, a power that spanned a third of the Milky Way, had not responded. No fleets, no messages, no threats. They had simply watched, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Eris now lived in the silence he had created, a self-imposed exile on Black Site Epsilon, a forgotten research station tethered to the corpse of a gas giant in the lawless outer quadrants. He was a ghost haunted by a ghost of his own making, a man who had saved his species by committing the perfect, untraceable deicide. His warden, his protector, his only companion, was Gianna. She had been a colonel in the Terran Defense Force, a woman with eyes as hard as neutronium and a soul forged in the fires of Earth's desperate survival. She saw Eris not as a monster, but as a necessary evil, the cold calculus that had kept humanity in the equation. Her presence was a constant, grating reminder of the choice he had made. "They're still scanning the outer marker," she said, her voice cutting through his reverie from the station's command console. She didn't turn, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. One ship, no transponder, Ethel design, but old, pre-Harmony class. Eris felt a familiar cold dread mix with a surge of something he hadn't felt in years, morbid curiosity. "Let them come closer," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. Gianna's fingers tensed over the weapons control panel. "Protocol is clear. Eris. Unidentified Ethel vessel is to be vaporized on sight. That was your protocol. You wrote it 10 years ago." "I did," he conceded, pushing himself up from the worn chair in his observation lounge. The star charts on the wall seemed to mock him. A map of a galaxy he had fundamentally broken. 10 years of silence buys them a conversation. A conversation she finally turned, her face incredulous. "They sent a plague that would have erased our children from existence. We replied by wiping out one of their worlds. The conversation is over. This is the part where they send the assassin. An assassin doesn't announce its arrival by sitting on the front step for 3 hours," Eris countered, walking towards the command deck. He felt a strange sense of inevitability, as if this was an appointment he had made a decade ago. He owed them this. He owed their ghosts an audience. One life sign aboard. "Gianna, scan it. Tell me what you see." She grumbled, her fingers flying across the console, her distrust a palpable force in the cramped space. "Life sign is stable. Ethel, confirmed. Biological readings are nominal, almost too nominal, like a textbook example. No weapons signatures, no exotic energy readings. It's a shuttle, a diplomatic barge. Maybe. Open a channel." Eris commanded. "No." She shot back. "We don't know what they can do. A signal could be a weapon. Then let them dock." Gianna stood up so fast, her chair scraped against the deck plating. "Have you lost your mind? We have one weapon on this station." "Eris." "One. The prototype Echo, if they get it." "They're not here for the weapon," he said, his voice softer now. "They're here for the man who built it. Bring the ship into Bay 3. I'll meet them there." He saw the conflict in her eyes, the soldier warring with the reluctant caretaker. She was sworn to protect him, but her every instinct screamed that he was inviting the snake into the garden. In the end, it was his authority, the very authority she resented, that won. She gave a curt, angry nod and turned back to the console, her voice clipped and professional as she issued docking instructions to the silent, waiting vessel. Eris didn't wait to watch it arrive. He walked to the sterile white transit corridor that led to the observation chamber overlooking docking Bay 3, the heavy mag-sealed door hissing shut behind him. This was where humanity met its demons. The Ethel shuttle was a thing of unsettling beauty, a smooth, obsidian teardrop that seemed to absorb the light around it. It settled into the docking clamps with an unnatural grace, utterly silent. The boarding ramp lowered, and from it emerged a single figure. It was an Ethel harmonist, its form tall and impossibly slender, wrapped in flowing silver robes that shimmered as if woven from liquid light. It had no discernible face, only a smooth, porcelain-like surface that showed no features. Yet Eris felt an intelligence of immense age and power, watching him through the reinforced plasteel of the observation window. Gianna's voice crackled in his earpiece. "The bay is sealed. Atmosphere is cycled. It's not moving. Just standing there. Let it know I will speak with it," Eris said, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. A moment later, the harmonist glided into the communication room adjacent to Eris's chamber, separated only by the transparent wall. It moved without walking, floating half an inch above the floor. It stopped in the center of the room, and a voice, serene and melodic, filled Eris's mind, not his ears. It wasn't a voice of anger or hate. It was the calm, patient tone of a teacher addressing a promising but deeply troubled student. "Creator Thorn, the dissonance acknowledges you." "You have a name?" Aris asked, his own spoken words feeling clumsy and brutal in comparison. "We are a reflection of our purpose. You may call me Harmonist. Why are you here after 10 years of silence? Is this the declaration of war we've been waiting for?" The smooth face of the creature seemed to tilt. An approximation of a curious gesture. "War Creator, you misunderstand. War is a failure of harmony, a chaotic spasm. It is beneath you as it is beneath us. You have already proven you can destroy us. We have already proven we can erase you. A war between us would not be a conflict. It would be a universal reset. No, we are not here for war. Then what Eris pressed, leaning closer to the plasteel, trying to find a flicker of emotion, of intent, behind that blank facade. We are here to observe a consequence you did not foresee. We have spent 10 of your years studying the event at Kepler 186. Not the weapon, but its effect. The echo is a remarkable instrument, creator, a testament to the uniquely terrifying focus of the human mind when it feels wronged. You did not just destroy a world, you tore a hole in the fabric of causality. Eris felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's recycled air. That's theoretical jargon. You can't tear causality. Can't you? The harmonist replied, its mental voice laced with something that might have been pity. Every action has a reaction. Every symphony has its echo. You targeted and removed a specific quantum frequency from the universe, an entire species' resonance. But the universe abhors a vacuum, both in matter and in meaning. You created a wound, a void in the quantum foam where something used to be. And that wound is now screaming into dimensions you cannot perceive. Gianna's voice was sharp in his ear. Aris, what is it saying? Our translators are getting nothing but static. It's fine. Gianna, stay quiet, he whispered, never taking his eyes off the creature. What are you talking about? What dimensions? The harmonist extended a long, three-fingered hand, and the air in its room shimmered. A holographic star chart appeared, a replica of the one on Eris's wall, but with an addition that made his blood run cold. There was a blight on it, a creeping, dark stain that seemed to emanate from the location of the now erased Kepler colony. It was spreading, slowly, like a cosmic gangrene. There are realities layered over your own. Universes with different physical laws, different fundamental constants. They are kept separate by the very structure of space-time, by the steady hum of existence. Your weapon created a silence, a dead frequency in that hum, and that silence has become a beacon. A deep, primal fear began to dawn in Aris, a terror far greater than any Ethel fleet could inspire. He had been so focused on the enemy in front of him, he never considered he might be creating a new one behind his back. A beacon for what he demanded, for the things that live in the silence between realities, the harmonist said, the things that hunger for universes with substance. We have known of them for eons. We call them the static. They are the reason for harmony. They are the reason we cull chaotic species like your own. Not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to keep the universal symphony playing, lest the silence invite them in. You did not just commit genocide, Creator Thorn. You unlocked the door and invited them to a feast. Aris felt weak, gripping the edge of the console for support. This couldn't be real. It was a trick, a psychological weapon designed to paralyze humanity with fear. You're lying. This is a threat, a way to make us dismantle the echo. The harmonist's featureless face seemed to turn toward the large viewport that showed the starfield beyond the station. Its mental voice was somber, heavy with a finality that shattered Eris's disbelief. We did not come here to threaten you. We do not need to. We have already seeded our arc ships. Our exodus is prepared. We are not here to stop you from destroying yourselves. We are here to watch what you have summoned. It is a consequence of your choice, and therefore, a dissonance you must resolve or be consumed by. The great harmony is not about victory. It is about persistence. We will persist elsewhere. You will not. The creature then raised its slender arm, pointing a finger not at Eris, but at the star field in the main viewport. The first sign would be the silence spreading, the symphony losing its instruments, one by one. You have been watching your stars. Creator, have you noticed Eris's eyes followed the direction of the pointing finger towards the familiar constellation of Lyra, towards the brilliant, sapphire blue glow of the star Vega, a celestial landmark for every human navigator, except it wasn't there. A patch of absolute, perfect blackness stood where one of the brightest stars in Earth's sky should have been. It hadn't exploded. It hadn't faded. It had simply been turned off. Gianna's frantic voice screamed in his ear, confirming what he was seeing. Aris Vega is gone. All observatories are reporting it. Just vanished. What the hell is going on? What did that thing say to you? Aris couldn't answer. He could only stare into the new, terrifying void in the heavens as the harmonist's final words echoed in the silent, screaming chambers of his mind. It has begun. The echo has been answered. The silence in Aris's mind was shattered by Gianna's voice, a raw, terrified shriek that was utterly alien coming from the stoic soldier. Report all stellar observatories. TDF Deep Space Command. Civilian networks report on Vega. She yelled into the comms panel, her knuckles white. The only reply was a hiss of empty space. The long-range comms were dead, not jammed, not malfunctioning. The carrier wave itself seemed to be absorbed into nothingness, as if the station were suddenly encased in a soundproof box the size of a solar system. Eris stumbled back from the viewport, his hand pressed to his chest. The missing star burned into his retinas like a glimpse of the abyss. The harmonist remained perfectly still in the adjacent room, a statue of serene judgment. It hadn't come to threaten. It had come to bear witness. Your creation was a song of silence. The Ethel's mental voice whispered, a final chilling epitaph. This is its chorus. Without another gesture, the harmonist glided back towards its shuttle, its movements fluid and unhurried. It was not fleeing. It was simply departing. The obsidian teardrop of a ship detached from the station with that same unnatural grace, its engines leaving no heat, no radiation, no wake. It simply ceased to be there. Another small silence in a universe suddenly full of them. Gianna slammed her fist on the console. It's gone. Comms are out. The star is gone. Aris, talk to me. What did that thing tell you? He turned to face her, his expression one she had never seen before. Not the haunted guilt of the weapon's creator, but the stark, primal terror of a man who had just learned the true name of God and found it to be a void. He tried to explain, his words tumbling over each other, a frantic mess of quantum mechanics, theoretical dimensions, and cosmic symphonies. He spoke of a wound in causality, a dead frequency, a beacon in the silence. Gianna stared at him, her soldier's mind struggling to find a foothold in the sheer insanity of it all. It's a trick, she said, her voice a low growl of defiance, a shield against the encroaching madness, a psychological weapon. They're trying to make us panic, dismantle our defenses. They're projecting an illusion, scrambling our sensors. Her words died in her throat. A low hum had begun to permeate the station, a subsonic vibration that made the deck plates thrum and the fillings in their teeth ache. It wasn't a sound from the station's machinery. It felt like it was coming from the very atoms of the air. Then, the station's internal sensors began to scream. Proximity alerts blared from every console, but the external cameras showed nothing but empty space. The life support system reported that the station's internal volume was fluctuating, expanding and contracting by cubic meters every second. The primary chronometer, a quantum lock device accurate to a trillionth of a second, began to scroll random numbers, past and future dates flashing in a chaotic cascade. "What is that?" Gianna whispered, her hand instinctively going to the sidearm holstered at her hip, a useless gesture against a foe that was rewriting the laws of physics. "It's here," Eris breathed, his eyes wide. "It's touching us. The static." The true horror began subtly. Aris was watching Gianna check a diagnostic panel when, for a fraction of a second, her image seemed to smear, her arm stretching into an impossibly long, distorted shape before snapping back into place. She flinched, rubbing her arm as if feeling a phantom limb. A moment later, a maintenance drone clattered down a corridor, but as it passed under a flickering light panel, it became transparent, its internal wiring visible for a heartbeat before it solidified again. It was as if reality itself was a flickering projection, and the bulb was beginning to fail. Gianna saw it too. She drew her weapon, her face pale but her stance firm. A warrior facing a nightmare she couldn't shoot. "Seal the command deck," she ordered, her voice tight. "Run a full diagnostic on the station's structural integrity fields." But Eris was already moving, not to a defensive position, but to the observation lounge. He grabbed a stylus and began to write, frantically, on the smooth, metallic surface of the wall, the star charts becoming a canvas for his desperate calculations. Equations spiraled outwards, a madman's Rosetta Stone attempting to translate the language of uncreation. He was no longer a physicist. He was an exorcist. And the ghost was the very structure of the cosmos. While Aris descended into a fever of quantum theory, Gianna became his anchor to the fragmenting reality. She moved through the station methodically, checking every system, sealing every bulkhead, her training a solitary rock in a sea of chaos. She rebooted systems that reported impossible errors, ignored sensors that screamed of phantoms, and focused on the tangible oxygen levels, power conduits, hull integrity. She was a soldier on a battlefield where the only weapon was denial. The glitches grew worse. A corridor leading to the hydroponics bay suddenly appeared to stretch into an infinite, repeating tunnel, the far end lost in a vanishing point of its own geometry. A storage locker opened to reveal not supplies, but a swirling vortex of black, silent energy that smelled of ozone and cold stone, snapping shut a second later as if it had never been. The hum intensified, and with it came a sound, the faint, layered whisper of static, as if a billion dead channels were all broadcasting at once, just at the edge of hearing. It was a sound that didn't just enter the ears. It seemed to manifest directly in the brain, a thought that wasn't your own. 3 days passed in a blur of encroaching dread. They barely ate or slept. The station was a haunted house adrift in an ocean of dissolving stars, and they were its only inhabitants. On the 4th day, Eris finally stopped writing. He stood before the wall, now covered entirely in a dense web of equations, his face gaunt, his eyes burning with a terrifying, ecstatic light. "I can't close it," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "The wound is too big." The echo wasn't a weapon that fired a single shot. It was a bell that can't be unrung. The silence it created is now a fundamental constant of this universe. Gianna holstered her weapon and walked to his side, looking at the incomprehensible script on the wall. "Then we're dead," she stated, not with fear, but with the flat acceptance of a soldier who finally understands the odds. "No," Eris said, a strange, fierce hope in his eyes. "No, not yet. I can't silence the echo, but I might be able to change its tune." He pointed a trembling finger at a complex waveform equation in the center of the wall. "The static is drawn to the specific quantum frequency of the nothingness we created. It's a predator that hunts a very specific prey. If we can't eliminate the prey, we have to make it poisonous. We have to broadcast a new signal from inside the wound, a counter-resonance, a signal so complex, so chaotic, so fundamentally dissonant that it acts as a repellent. We can't fix the hole, but we can scramble the message it's sending." Gianna's eyes followed his finger. She didn't understand the math, but she understood the logic of war. "A new signal. You mean another weapon. A different kind of echo." Eris confirmed. "Not one of silence, but one of noise. A symphony of pure chaos broadcast directly into the heart of the void. It wouldn't destroy the static, but it might make our reality indigestible to it. It might force it to look elsewhere." For the first time in days, a flicker of Gianna's old self returned. She had a target. She had a mission. "Can you build it?" she asked. Eris looked around the cramped, glitching station. The lights flickered, and for a moment, the wall of equations seemed to ripple like cloth. "Not here. The prototype Echo on board is a scalpel. I need to build a sledgehammer. I need a quantum forge, terawatts of power, access to an entanglement array 100 times more powerful than this station's. I need a place I never wanted to see again." He turned and looked at the star chart, at the dark stain that was spreading from the direction of the Kepler system. His finger traced a path through the void. "There was a monitoring station we built to observe the echo's effects. Black Site Daedalus. It's built into an asteroid belt just 2 systems away from the first silence." Gianna understood immediately. To fight the ghost, they had to return to the graveyard. To build the cure, they had to work in the shadow of the disease. It was a suicide mission into the heart of the crisis, a journey to the epicenter of a reality quake. "The station's FTL drive is still functional," she said, her voice steady again, the soldier back in command. "But the navigation computer is a mess. It'll take me time to plot a course manually, assuming the laws of spatial geometry still apply between here and there." "They'll apply," Eris said, a grim certainty in his tone. "The static erodes reality. It doesn't rewrite it all at once. It's a tide, not a tsunami. We still have time, but not much." Gianna nodded, turning back to the command console. The impossible had become a mission parameter. The cosmic horror had become an objective. She began the long, arduous process of coaxing the station's damaged systems to life, her hands moving with a newfound purpose. As the station's engines began to hum, a different, more welcome sound, Eris took one last look at the viewport. More stars were missing now. Small, distant suns had been snuffed out, leaving pockmarks in the celestial sphere. The silence was spreading. He had rung a bell that had awakened a slumbering god, and now he was going to try and scream into its ear, hoping it would be enough to make it turn away. The small station shuddered as its FTL drive engaged, tearing a hole in normal space and plunging them into the chaotic, non-Euclidean vortex of hyperspace, racing towards the one place in the universe that was arguably the most dangerous, the most haunted, the edge of the void he had created. The journey to Blackside Daedalus was a descent into a special kind of hell. FTL travel was never a placid experience. It was the act of punching a hole through the skin of the universe and riding the subsequent shockwave. But this was different. The hyperspace tunnel, usually a shimmering, orderly conduit of blues and whites, was now a diseased artery, shot through with veins of sickening gray and patches of utter, light-devouring black. The station's reality-stabilizing fields whined under a strain they were never designed to handle, struggling to maintain a coherent bubble of physics in a medium that was actively trying to dissolve it. Gianna was wrestling with the ship. The navigation computer, once her most reliable tool, was now her enemy. It kept trying to correct their course based on stellar landmarks that no longer existed. Its logic circuits caught in a feedback loop of existential confusion. She was forced to fly manually, a terrifying prospect in the churning chaos of hyperspace. It was less like piloting and more like stitching. She'd feel a tear in their FTL bubble, a sudden lurch, a wave of vertigo, and have to fire a burst from the maneuvering thrusters to patch the hole, a desperate act of reinforcement against the encroaching chaos. She saw things in the swirling vortex outside the viewport, fleeting images, half-formed and nightmarish. A city of towers made from screaming faces, a forest of crystalline trees that grew and shattered in the same instant, a sky filled with dying, weeping eyes. They were the universe's fever dreams, the delirium of a cosmos succumbing to a terminal illness. Aris was of little help. He was strapped into a secondary console, his own eyes wide with a different kind of horror. For him, it wasn't about the visceral terror of the journey. It was about the cold, intellectual horror of the math. He could see it in the energy readings, in the way the station's temporal sync kept slipping. He was watching the fundamental equations of the universe decay in real time. He saw Planck's constant fluctuate. He saw the speed of light waver. The very grammar of creation was being erased, replaced with the babbling of an idiot god. "It's not just erasing things," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the groaning of the hull. "It's simplifying them, reducing complexity. It's entropy, given a hunger." The journey should have taken 3 days. It took 7. 7 days of wrestling with a dying universe, of seeing reality fray at the edges. Gianna's own memories began to glitch. For a moment, she'd remember a childhood on a Martian colony, the red dust and the domed cities, before snapping back to the reality of her terrestrial upbringing. The false memories were seamless, emotionally resonant, and utterly terrifying. It was the static, not just outside, but inside, probing the complexity of a human mind and finding it malleable. When they finally dropped out of FTL, the shock was profound. The silence. It was deeper here, heavier, the background radiation of the cosmos. The faint hum of distant pulsars and quasars that filled all of space was gone. They had arrived in a dead zone, a patch of the universe that had been muted. Before them hung the Daedalus station, a skeletal framework of girders and modules clinging to a massive, pockmarked asteroid. It was dark, lifeless, a mausoleum built to watch over a grave. "No power signatures," Gianna reported, her voice flat with exhaustion. It's running on emergency batteries. If that, we're going in blind. Eris nodded, his eyes fixed on the spectacle outside. They were on the edge of the wound. The Kepler 186 system was not visible, not as a black patch, but as a distortion, a place where the light of distant galaxies seemed to bend around something, as if space-time itself were flowing around an invisible stone in a river. The sight made his soul ache. It was the scene of his crime, a monument to his genius and his folly. Docking was a manual, nerve-wracking procedure. Gianna guided the smaller Epsilon station into a cavernous, unpressurized docking bay on Daedalus, the magnetic clamps engaging with a final, echoing clang that sounded like a coffin lid closing. For a long time, neither of them moved. They were two people in a can, docked to a larger can, floating in an ocean of absolute silence. "Okay," Gianna finally said, breaking the spell. "First, we get the lights on. I need to find the main reactor and see if I can bring it online. You find the quantum forge. Find what you need to build your noisemaker." They donned environmental suits and entered the cold-airted dark station. The air was thin, the emergency life support barely functioning, their helmet lights cut sharp. Lonely beams through the oppressive darkness. Corridors stretched out, filled with a fine layer of dust and the debris of a hasty, or perhaps incomplete, evacuation. Datapads lay on consoles. Chairs were overturned. A coffee mug floated in 0G, its contents long since evaporated. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the crew had simply vanished mid-sentence. Gianna located the engineering deck, a vast chamber dominated by the inert bulk of a cold fusion reactor. It was a delicate, complex piece of machinery, and she set about the painstaking work of running diagnostics and coaxing its systems back to life. Aris, meanwhile, made his way to the heart of the station, the primary observation lab, which housed the quantum forge. The forge was a massive, spherical chamber, its interior lined with thousands of crystalline lenses and superconducting filaments. This was the anvil where he would attempt to hammer out a new reality. As he began to interface with the forge's dormant systems, he found the station's logs. They were corrupted, fragmented. The data decayed in a way that wasn't linear. Words and sentences were missing, replaced with strings of nonsensical symbols, or, more disturbingly, with pure digital silence. He managed to piece together fragments of the final days from the logs of the lead researcher, a Dr. Kalen. Day 43. Post-echo. The silence is evolving. We are detecting structured patterns within the void, not energy, not matter. Information. It's mimicking the quantum resonance of the surrounding space, but imperfectly, like a bad echo. A later entry was more frantic. Day 47. The station's AI is exhibiting anomalous behavior. It's creating subroutines without a source command. They are elegant, complex, and utterly alien. When queried, the AI refers to itself as we. The glitches are getting worse. Crew members are reporting moments of lost time, vivid hallucinations, false memories. Aris felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He thought of Gianna's Martian childhood. The last entry was almost completely corrupted, but Aris could make out a few terrifying phrases. Day 49. Not Kalen. It wears his face. Saw it in the reflection. Not a void. It's a mirror. It's learning the shape of us. The log ended there. Eris looked up from the console, his gaze sweeping across the dark, cavernous lab. He was not alone. The feeling was as certain as the cold metal of the deck beneath his boots. He was being watched, not by eyes, but by a pervasive, calculating intelligence that was learning him from the inside out. A sudden, blinding flare of light from the direction of engineering made him jump. A deep, powerful hum resonated through the station, a sound of immense energy finally unleashed. The lights flickered, then blazed to life, flooding the corridors and labs with sterile, white light. Gianna had done it. The cold fusion reactor was online. A wave of relief washed over Eris, quickly followed by a surge of adrenaline. They had power. They had a chance. He turned back to the forge, his mind racing, equations and theories clicking into place. He knew what he had to build. He walked over to the lab's main observation dome, a massive sheet of transparent diamond that looked out over the distorted void of the Kepler system. He needed to see his enemy. As he stared into the warped star field, he saw a reflection on the inner surface of the dome. It was his own face, cast in the harsh light of the newly activated lab. But as he watched, the reflection smiled, a wide, predatory grin that his own face was not making. The eyes in the reflection were not his. They were pits of static, swirling voids that mirrored the vast, hungry emptiness outside. The thing wearing his face in the reflection raised a hand and waved, a gesture of cheerful, malevolent greeting. Dr. Kalen's final warning echoed in his mind. It's a mirror. It's learning the shape of us. The static wasn't just a force. It was becoming a presence, and it was already inside the house. A scream died in Aris's throat, choked off by a sudden, paralyzing wave of static that flooded his mind. The reflection, the thing wearing his face, tilted its head, its smile widening into an impossible, jaw-stretching rictus. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was solidifying, gaining a horrifying three-dimensionality against the backdrop of the void. This wasn't a hallucination. This was an intrusion. The static was using his own self-image, his own quantum signature, as a template to manifest itself into their reality. Gianna's voice, sharp and laced with adrenaline, crackled in his helmet comm. Eris, I have the reactor at 70%, but the energy grid is unstable. It's like something is drawing power without a conduit. What's your status? He couldn't speak. His muscles were locked, his body a prisoner to the thing in the reflection. The doppelganger raised its hand again, and the lights in the lab flickered violently. The hum of the station's power grid deepened, dropping in pitch to a guttural, menacing growl. It was feeding on the station's newly restored lifeblood. Eris, respond. Gianna's voice was a lifeline, and he clung to it, forcing his jaw to move, his tongue to form words. It's here, he managed, his voice a strangled gasp. In the lab. It's me. There was a moment of silence on the comm, then the sound of her mag boots clanging on the deck plates at a dead run. I'm on my way. Hold on. But the Eris thing was already peeling itself away from the dome. It flowed like liquid shadow, its form constantly shifting. A chaotic blur of limbs and faces, Eris's, Kalen's. Other faces he didn't recognize, but felt were the ghosts of the Daedalus crew before coalesced into a more stable, yet still imperfect, copy of himself. It stood in the center of the lab, its head twitching in spasmodic, bird-like motions, its static-filled eyes fixed on him. It didn't speak with a voice, It spoke with the station. The lights flickered in a complex, rhythmic pattern, and the hum of the machinery modulated, forming a crude, synthesized sentence that vibrated through the very floor. You are loud. The raw, conceptual meaning slammed into Eris's mind. His consciousness, his complex brain, his very existence was a source of noise, of information, of food. This thing didn't want to kill him. It wanted to consume his pattern, to simplify his complex, chaotic song into its own monotonous hum. He was a meal that was finally beginning to understand the nature of the diner. The heavy blast door to the lab hissed open, and Gianna stormed in. Pulse rifle raised. She stopped dead, her eyes widening as she saw the two identical figures. The Eris thing turned its head a full 180 degrees with a wet, popping sound to face her, its smile unwavering. "Eris," Gianna said, her voice dangerously calm, the rifle steady in her hands. "Which one of you is real, the one who is afraid?" Aris forced out, his heart hammering against his ribs. The doppelganger took a step towards her, its movement unnaturally smooth, and mimicked his voice perfectly. "Don't shoot. Gianna, it's a trick of the light, a distortion caused by the void. I'm me." Gianna didn't hesitate. She fired. A bolt of superheated plasma erupted from the rifle and struck the Aris thing square in the chest. But it didn't burn or bleed. The plasma was absorbed into its form, causing the static in its eyes to swirl faster, brighter. The thing laughed, a sound like grinding metal and breaking glass that echoed from the station's speakers. It had fed on the energy. More. The station seemed to say, "Loud is good." "It's not matter," Eris yelled, finally breaking free from his paralysis. "You can't shoot it. It's a localized breakdown in physical law, a knot in space-time." He scrambled back towards the quantum forge, his mind racing. He had been planning to build a repellent, a counter-symphony. He didn't have time for a symphony. He needed a single, deafening, intolerable note. The Eris thing ignored Gianna now. It glided towards Eris, its form growing larger, less stable, shedding the human guise for something more primal, a pillar of swirling, glitching darkness that warped the air round it. The floor buckled, and a console sparked and melted as the entity passed. "Gianna!" "The reactor!" Eris shouted, his fingers flying across the forge's control panel. "I need all of it, everything you can give me, on my mark. I need you to overload the primary energy conduits and shunt the entire output of the reactor directly to this forge." Gianna's eyes darted from the approaching horror to Eris. "Overload the reactor. That will create a singularity. It will tear the whole station apart. Us with it. It's the only way," he screamed back, his plan forming out of pure, desperate inspiration. "I can't broadcast a signal from the forge. I have to turn the forge itself into the signal. I'm not building a noisemaker. I'm building a bomb made of pure, weaponized chaos." He was bypassing safeties, rewriting core protocols, turning the delicate scientific instrument into a crude, catastrophic weapon. He was programming it to generate a single, infinitely complex, non-repeating fractal of quantum information, a signal that was, by its very nature, the mathematical definition of insanity. It was a data bomb designed to overload a being made of pure data. The pillar of static was almost upon him, the air growing cold, the sound of a billion whispers filling his ears. He could feel it probing his mind, sifting through his memories, his fears, his loves tasting the flavor of his soul. "Gianna, now!" he roared. From her position near the door, Gianna didn't hesitate a second longer. She keyed a command into her wrist-mounted comm unit, bypassing every safety protocol in the reactor system. "Override Alpha Zero. Reactor core containment fields disengaged. Shunting all power. God help us. Eris." Across the station, every light bulb exploded in a shower of sparks as an unimaginable torrent of raw energy surged from the reactor. The hum became a physical force, a bone-shattering roar that shook the station to its foundations. Thick, superconducting cables glowed cherry red, then white-hot, melting their insulation as they channeled the power of a small star into the quantum forge. The spherical forge chamber at the heart of the lab began to glow with an intense, violet light. The crystalline lenses inside began to spin, faster and faster, blurring into a solid ring of incandescent energy. The pillar of static recoiled, its form wavering as the raw, unstructured chaos of the forge's signal began to flood the room. It was like trying to drink from a fire hose. The simple, hungry intelligence of the static was being overwhelmed by an information density it couldn't process, a complexity it couldn't simplify. The station's synthesized voice, which had been the static's mouthpiece, now screamed. It was a sound of pure agony, a digital shriek of a consciousness being torn apart. Too loud, too loud. The Eris thing dissolved, its form collapsing back into a swirling vortex. It tried to retreat, to flee back into the reflections, back into the silence. But it was too late. The forge had it locked in a feedback loop of pure, weaponized meaning. "It's working!" Aris yelled, gripping the console as the entire lab began to tear itself apart around them. "But the forge can't contain the energy. The whole station is going to—" He was cut off as the floor beneath them ripped open. A wave of pure force, the shock wave of the collapsing reactor core, erupted from engineering. Gianna was thrown back against the far wall with a sickening crunch. Eris was flung forward, his head striking the forge's console. His vision swam, the violet light of the forge filling his world. The station screamed its death agony around him. He had fought the silence with noise, and the noise was now consuming everything. Through the haze of pain and the blinding light, he saw the static. It was no longer a pillar of darkness. It was a shrieking, writhing fractal of corrupted light and impossible geometry, caught in the beam of the forge, being forcibly filled with a universe of chaotic information it could not digest. It was a parasite dying of gluttony. His last coherent thought before the world dissolved into violet-white fire was one of profound and terrible irony. He had created a weapon to erase a species, which had summoned a demon that fed on reality. Now, to fight that demon, he had turned himself and his last remaining companion into the fuel for a bomb of pure, unadulterated chaos. He had saved the universe, perhaps, but he had done it by becoming the loudest, most dissonant song of all, a final defiant scream before his own personal silence. The forge, the station, and everything within it collapsed into a single, infinitely bright, and utterly silent point. There was no explosion, no final, searing flash of light. The universe did not end with a bang or a whimper, but with a chord. Eris experienced it not as a man, but as a resonance. He was the violet light, the collapsing singularity, the shriek of the dying static, and the deafening roar of the chaos bomb, all at once. He tasted calculus and saw the color of a paradox. He was a single, perfect, infinitely complex note played on an instrument the size of a star system. And then he was just Eris. He opened his eyes. The pain in his head was a distant, unimportant ache. He was lying on a surface that was neither hard nor soft, in a place that was neither light nor dark. He sat up, his body feeling strangely light, humming with a latent energy he couldn't explain. He was in the lab, or what was left of it, the walls, the consoles, the quantum forge itself. They were all still there, but they were made of a quiescent, pearlescent material, like solidified moonlight. The chaos had frozen mid-detonation. A wave of force, rendered in solid, crystalline energy, hung in the air a meter from his face. "Gianna," he whispered, and the name echoed, not in the air, but in the very structure of the room, the sound rippling through the frozen chaos like a pebble dropped in a still pond. He saw her then, slumped against the far wall, a trickle of dried blood on her temple. She was breathing shallowly. He scrambled to her side, his movements feeling unnaturally swift. As he knelt beside her, he saw that the wall she had been thrown against was not a wall. It was a window, a vast, panoramic viewport that looked out not onto a field of stars, but onto something utterly new. They were in a bubble. Outside, the universe was a maelstrom of raw, untamed possibility. He saw the seams of reality, the glowing filaments of space-time connecting swirling nebulae of creation and silent oceans of absolute void. He could see other dimensions, layered like sheets of colored glass, their alien geometries pulsing with strange life, and through it all, like a predatory shoal of fish, swam the static of vast, cohesive consciousness of nothingness, a hungry void. But it kept its distance, their bubble, their frozen shard of reality, repelled it. The static swirled around them, pressing against the boundaries, but it could not enter. Gianna groaned, her eyes fluttering open. She flinched, her hand going to her head. Then her eyes focused on Eris, and then on the impossible vista outside. "What? Where are we?" she rasped, her soldier's mind struggling to categorize the uncategorizable. "We're not dead," Eris said, a slow, dawning awe in his voice. "We're just somewhere else, in the eye of the storm." He looked down at his own hands. They looked normal, but when he focused, he could see the faintest shimmer around them, a subtle distortion of the light, as if he were a heat haze in human form. The bomb didn't just detonate, it stabilized. It created a permanent field of dissonance, a self-sustaining island of pure, complex information. Gianna pushed herself into a sitting position, her gaze fixed on the swarming darkness outside. "So that's them, the static." "Yes," Eris said, "in this place. This echo chamber. For lack of a better word, it's poison to them. They can't consume it because it's infinitely complex. They can't simplify it." He paused, the final, terrifying piece of the puzzle falling into place. "It's not the station that's projecting the field, Gianna. It's me." She turned to look at him, truly look at him, and he saw a flicker of fear in her eyes, quickly suppressed. "What do you mean?" "It's you. The forge turned me into the signal," he explained, the knowledge blooming in his mind, as intuitive as breathing. "My consciousness, my memories, my very quantum signature It was all woven into the chaos bomb at the moment of detonation. I am the repellent. This station, this bubble of reality, it's just the artifact of my presence. I am the loudest song. They sat in silence for a long time, two castaways on an island at the end of the universe. The silence they shared was not empty. It was the silence of acceptance, of a shared fate that was too vast for words. Gianna, the soldier, the pragmatist, was the first to break it. So what now? Do we just stay here forever? A scarecrow in a field of ghosts. I don't think we have a choice, Aris replied, his voice heavy with the weight of his new existence. I am the anchor for this place. If I leave, the silence comes back, and the static will have a clear path. His genius, his arrogance, had brought him here. He had created a weapon to save his home, and in doing so, had made himself its eternal, exiled guardian. As if summoned by their conversation, a new light appeared in the void outside. A single, obsidian teardrop of a ship materialized just beyond the edge of their bubble. It was the Harmonist's vessel. It hovered there, observing them, a silent witness to the final, unforeseen consequence. The Ethel's calm, melodic voice entered their minds, no longer tinged with pity, but with something akin to reverence. You have not restored the harmony. Creator Thorn, you have become a new, singular instrument within it, a chord of beautiful, terrible chaos that holds the silence at bay. You knew this would happen, Aris projected back. A statement, not a question. We knew a choice would be made. We did not know its shape. Your species is a font of unpredictable solutions. You do not silence a dissonance. You absorb it. You transform it. You become its conductor. It is your greatest strength and your most terrifying flaw. Is Earth safe? Gianna asked, her voice a tight knot of hope and fear. For now, the harmonist replied, the wound in your reality is no longer screaming. It is singing. The static has recoiled, but it will always be listening for the song to end. The universe is larger than you, and the silence is patient. The Ethel ship did not wait for a reply. It turned, and with its usual unsettling grace, vanished back into the chaos from whence it came, leaving them once again in their magnificent isolation. Gianna slowly got to her feet, wincing as she put weight on her leg. She walked to Eris's side, standing before the great window. She looked at the swirling, cosmic battle outside. Then she looked at him, at the faint shimmer of pure information that now constituted his being. The fear in her eyes was gone, replaced by a familiar, resolute calm. She was a soldier, and she had her post. Her mission had simply changed. She placed a hand on his shoulder, a simple human gesture that grounded him, that reminded the living equation of the man it still was. You're not a song. Aris, she said, her voice quiet but firm. You're a lighthouse, and every lighthouse needs a keeper. Aris looked at her, at the unwavering loyalty and strength in her eyes. And for the first time since he'd unleashed his terrible creation upon the galaxy, he did not feel like a monster or a savior. He felt like a man who was not alone. He had saved his species, but lost his home. He had defeated the ultimate darkness, but had become its eternal warden. He turned his gaze back to the swirling chaos beyond the glass, to the hungry silence that waited just beyond the borders of his own soul. The end game was over. The watch had just begun. The silence was still the loudest thing in the universe. But now it had a shepherd, and the shepherd had a guard.